Hi there, this is Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and I've got something interesting to share with you. Today, we're going to look at a book test. A book test. Recently, I was visiting my folks in Pennsylvania. I live in New York, and I was asked to help out with their vacation Bible school. So that's an opportunity for me to do some gospel magic presentations. And because these kinds of activities are themed, I had to come up with a series of tricks and illustrations through the week that would fit the theme for that particular day. And this particular theme, without getting into it, dealt with the senses, the five senses. And on the very last night, there was the sense of smell was part of the theme for that evening. And I had to come up with something that was going to work with that. And as I thought about it, this was for like a larger presentation. It was a closing ceremony, so there's a lot more people there. I needed something bigger that was going to play on a kind of a broader stage for more people than the typical lesson that I was doing for a small group each night. I'd do the same lesson a couple times for different groups, and I would perform a trick. I might bring up some of those tricks that I came up with in subsequent videos, but I want to talk about a book test. So I did a book test, and as I thought about the sense of smell, I thought, well, I could do a book test, but I could use cookbooks. And I'm sure this is not a new idea. I'm sure there are book tests that use cookbooks, but it occurred to me that this would be very, very advantageous to use a cookbook or a set of cookbooks, because you're looking probably in the Revelation for a recipe rather than a particular word. And with a recipe, you have obviously the name of whatever it is, but you also have an ingredients list. So it was an opportunity to kind of slow call and slow play the Revelation. And if this had to do with a sense of smell, it occurred to me that if I used a cookbook and we're dealing with recipes which obviously smell good, hopefully, maybe I would reveal it based on smell, that I could smell what was on the page. And that led to other ideas too, about maybe the idea that they could treat it as a scratch and sniff kind of thing. You know, scratch and sniff stickers, where you scratch the sticker and you sniff it, and it kind of has a smell to it that fits the picture or whatever. I thought maybe I could, do kind of play on that concept in the Revelation as well. So keeping in mind, too, that for this particular company, doing a magical effect or a mentalism effect is pretty much a no-go, because being a vacation Bible school and it being at Gospel Magic, you really wouldn't play into the magical elements. This would have to be overtly and clearly a trick. So I figured that playing this up as a scratch and sniff sort of revelation eliminates that kind of magical side to it. But if you were doing this for mentalism, you could, adapt it for that kind of presentation as well. But anyway, this fit. I had my concept worked out, and then I had to figure out what's the method going to be. So for me, I just go to standard methods for the test. Now, at first I thought, well, I could know maybe a recipe out of each book, and then I could just force the page and they could pick freely. But then I got a little concerned about the amount of information that I'd be juggling in the moment and the idea that I might mess it up. So I decided, well, it's easy enough to force a book. So I'll just know I'll know one recipe on a set of pages from one book. And I ended up having to know a few recipes, which I'll talk about in a minute as I kind of worked this out. But I would know one recipe from one book, and then I would force that book using Equivoque. So that's how I get the book out there. Then I got to thinking about how would I force the page. And, I thought, well, maybe I could do some slips of paper, with page numbers, and I could draw one out, and I could, force it with a thumb tip billet or something like that. And I thought, no, well, maybe I could use some cards. And then I thought, all these ideas, they require me to add something that isn't otherwise there. And I really couldn't use equivocation because I'm already doing Equivoque for the book. So another level of Equivoque would probably expose both methods. So it occurred to me, well, I have a book. I have 3 books, in fact. I could use one of the books that is not the target and use it as a riffle force, use it as a deck of cards and just do a riffle force from the pages in the book. So I had my method worked out. I would use Equivocate to force the book. I would force the page from one of the books we weren't using, and then from there I would have them go to that page in the target book, and then I can do my slow played revelation, the scratch and sniff sort of plot. So let me just talk about how I worked this out and some things I discovered along the way. Now, as I say these methods, and I explain to you what the method is for the book test, some of you are already done with this video and you're going on to something else because you're looking for something new and novel. But I argue that the old-fashioned forces are fully sufficient. And indeed, when I did this effect, I got a lot of how did you do that, and a lot of people guessing methods, and nobody was on. Nobody knew what I did. Even people who know the kinds of things that I do didn't necessarily catch on to how it worked out. And there's some circumstantial reasons why that was too, but I'll get to that as we go there. So old methods are still great methods. In fact, old methods may be the best methods. There's a reason why they're old and still known. So keep that in mind. The key is to, when you're using an old method, a staple, that you use one for the right reasons, because it has a benefit to it. It actually improves on the presentation. So in this case, a riffle force from a book improved dramatically on the presentation. That's why that was a good force, as opposed to bringing in some other kind of apparatus to force what I wanted. I could use what I had available to me, and that would be justified and look innocent, because I was using something that was just there rather than incorporating something else. So the book test is just these 3 books. There's nothing else involved in it. Now, what I did is I decided I was going to force this book, and my thinking started very early on with this, that this book has a graphic on the front, whereas these 2 books do not. I took off I removed the dust jackets from these, and this one had a colorful cover to it. So I thought, well, this is one that's likely to be taken because it actually has a cherry pie on it, American cooking. It's the, kind of that sweet sort of image to it that would be desirable. So I thought this would be the right one to force as opposed to one of the other 2. Now, in addition to that, I knew that I was going to be using Equivocate, but I would put this in the closest proximity to the spectator, that my volunteer. So what I did is I set this closest to them. I was at a table, and if this is the table and you're on the other side of the table, I had this one closest to... I'm sorry, excuse me. I had this one furthest away, closest to me, and then I had the other 2 in reasonable access, within access to the helper. And the question for the Equivocate was, I have 3 cookbooks here. They all have different recipes. You can look, and I took one of the books I wasn't going to use, and I just flipped through it so they could see that there were different items in it. And I set them down. I said, remove any 2 books from the table. Which 2 books would you like to remove? Now, the idea there is that if they take the 2 books that are in closest proximity, I get the direct hit, and the one remaining on the table is the one that will be forced. But you know how this works. If they remove that one and one of the other books, it's no problem. They pick that up, and then the next question is very good after I take one book away and I move it off the table. I say, great, could you hand me one back or give one back? And if they give me the one that's to be the target, I take that one. I say, great, this is the American cookbook, and then I just present it. I don't say, so you have chosen, or if they give me the other one, I don't say that leaves you with. The way you do Equivocate properly is you merely indicate the next point of interest. Do not recap. But recap's always very, very good in Magic, except for in Equivocate, unless you're recapping something way at the very end of the presentation. And in that case, you're just recapping the decisions that were free. Not specifically the decisions, but the fact that the decisions were free. That's the limit of the recap. So either way, you just point to whatever is left. Now let's say there's one situation here where they could have picked this book, which is the target, and this one. This is my force book. I had one that I was going to use to force, and the key is I had to be able to get to the page that I wanted to force without having to look for it. I didn't want to have to open this book and find the page. I wanted to be able to, in a tactile manner, find the pages that I was going to force. So at page 94 and 95, which is just past center on this book, I put 2 pieces of Scotch tape. I put one piece on 94 and one piece on 95. I folded it over the top with a tiny little millimeter size or 16th inch size margin. And then I flattened it out on top so that there would be a separation between the two. So one flap goes one way, one flap goes the other way. And what I could do is I could pick this book up with this side facing away from the audience and actually away from the spectator helping me. I could put my finger directly on that V, and then I could insert my fingernail and finger into that out of view. So I can hold the book like this, and then as I open it up, I can pinch the papers, the pages of the book in front of me, but hold that break with my index finger. So I'm not really trying to hide anything. If you were on this side of me, backstage, you would see this, but no one's in that point of view. And then I do the riffle for us. So I'd riffle, and they'd say stop. And what I would do is I would put my hand deep into it. I'd say right here. And of course they would nod, and if they don't, I don't care. I say right here, whatever they do, I don't care. And then what I do is I take my hand out, immediately out, and then I just open the book to the right page. I didn't try to make it look like I was holding that. I just put my hand in, removed it, and then opened the book to the page. It's a fleeting moment, and it doesn't have to have any kind of finessed, nuanced sleight of hand to it. Okay, so I force the page 94, 95. Now, if they were to pick this book, the target, and this book, I'm in that kind of Hoy book test sort of situation where I could just say, which one do you want to use? So each possible outcome has a different sort of response, which improves upon the outcome. It's not enough, I think, with equivoque. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be, and it probably shouldn't be, enough to just have the same dialogue no matter what the outcome is. I think if you can make any outcome look better than it really is, you should say the things that do that. Okay, so if it was take these 2 away, then I say we have here on the table the Great American Cookbook. Oh, I'll take those. Then you take those and set them down, right? And then I keep this in proximity so I can pick it up for the force. And then I go on from there. If they took the target book and the book of no interest, I would say, oh, very good. Give one back to me. And they would give me this one, and I could set this one down with the other. And I would say, you have there the American Cookbook, and then go on. Or if they gave this one back, I would take this book, and then I would say, we have the American Cookbook, and go on from there. Then I say, kind of absent-mindedly, before we get into that, I need to have you make a selection. And then I get the book out, I get my break, I do my force, stick my hand in. Notice here there's even a colored page. I don't even worry about that. It's just so quick. I put my hand, I say right here, I open it up, I show the page, and then I go on from there. Okay. Now, another element to this is, as I said, if they took these 2, I could say, which one do you want to use? If they said this book, I'd say, great. What I'm going to do here is have you make a selection, and then I use this for the selection. And then I bounce back to the book that they're still holding. If they say, I want to use this one, I say, great, hold on to that. I'll take the other book. But first I need to have you make a selection. And then I use this. Okay. Now, to the selection issue. When we get to the page, I make sure that they're the one that says what the page numbers are. So they say, I say, what pages are you on? They say 94 and 95. And I say, great, what is that 90 what? 4. So first of all, I act like I didn't hear them. They say it again. And then later on, I'm going to miscall it. This is important. Whenever you're doing a force like this, to improve upon the force in this kind of situation, a miscall is a very useful method. It may even be vital. And I think this is what really misdirected people from the idea that I forced that page. No one guessed that at all. Nobody thought that I made them go to the page. Some people said, oh, I think every page had that recipe on it or something. And I said, no, you could see that they were all different. And the spectator could see that they were different too. No one ever went for the number. Nobody assumed that I forced the number. That wasn't what it was. Another person thought that maybe all the books were the same. And that had something to do with it, which, wasn't true either and was demonstrated and whatnot. But miscalling off of a force is such a useful instrument. Using a miscall. I would do it not once, but maybe twice. And there's different ways that you can miscall. You can miscall by saying the wrong thing and then being corrected. I prefer, and the reason why I don't prefer to do that is because they may have forgotten what the number is and they may just take what I said. So I don't want to depend on them remembering. What I will do is I will usually say the first part of it if it's a large number. In this case, the way I would miscall is I said 90 what? And then they would do it. Or I would say it's 9, and then they would finish. And I did that a couple of times. Don't overdo it, but a couple of times is very helpful. The other thing I thought I could do is I would say, and I didn't do this in the performance, but I did practice it in this way, is I said, would you like 94 or 95? Now, to the spectator holding the book, this is pretty silly. But in terms of the alternate reality, the duality to it, to the spectators in the audience, they're not really looking at the book and they don't have the geographic understanding of a book, a left and a right. So if I say, which page number do you want, it really wouldn't matter. Okay, but to them, it sounds like the spectator made another choice in this series of choices that they made. They picked a book, they chose stop, and then they picked a number. The truth is because I'm going for a recipe, it wouldn't have mattered. If I said, which one do you want? And they said 95, when I have them go to page 95, my next instruction was, now open up to the book, to the page that you wanted, which was 90, they say 95. And then I would say, now you might be, and I did say this no matter what, even though they went to the beginning of the recipe. I would say, now you might be in the middle of a recipe. There might be a picture there, or it might be an ingredients list. Just look back to the beginning of the recipe to see what it is. Now what this does is that if they go for 95, they just have to look to the previous page to see the recipe is, which is 94. So no matter what they say, they've actually made the same selection. But to the audience, it looks like they made another decision. These layers of understanding, I think, are critical to a really good book test. This is not about having a method to get to a page. This is about having layers of methods to convey spontaneity, randomness, choices, and doing it in a way that is convincing. Now, one thing that happened as I was practicing this is I tried this with my wife a couple times, and the very first time I had her turn to the page that I was forcing, and immediately before I could say anything about, don't tell me what's on the page, she said, yeah, 94, Southern Fried Chicken. And it completely blew the effect, and it was kind of hard for me to really practice much more, at least with her. So it occurred to me that I had to have a backup for this. So not only did I know this page, which is the target, but I also just had a quick understanding of the next couple of recipes. So on the next page was jambalaya, and I just took a quick look at what that was. So if something got goofed up, I could always say, go to the next page, or go a couple recipes down, go over a few more pages. So this was chicken gumbo here. I just knew what the next couple were. So even if I was giving the directions and trying to be ahead of the game to make sure that they didn't call something out, just in case the spectator fouled up and said something out loud, I could say, oh, you're not supposed to tell me. Well, it's okay. Just go to the next recipe and take a look at that one. The audience should know that I wouldn't know that. If I didn't know that one, I wouldn't know the next one. So this was my backup for that. And I think it's important to have kind of planned out the possibilities for some kinds of unforced errors and have backups for that. Just sort of think about what all the possibilities are in a presentation as best you can. Okay, so they're on my page. We've got it all set. I know that it is Southern Fried Chicken. And I picked that one on purpose because I wanted to be able to say a few things. There's only a few ingredients in that. And I say, and I had them scratch the page. Now, this is another thing, too. It's good to have a couple of one-liners ready. So I'd say, now go ahead and scratch the page. And then I look at the audience, which is mostly kids. I'd say, does he look silly? And they say, yes. I'd say, perfect, right? And they're doing that. And they say, now wave it in the air so I can get some of that smell. The other line I had prepared is I said, oh, wait, I'm getting something. Can you smell that? Now, regardless of what anybody would do, and in this case, I did have a kid right near the front row said, yeah. I said, can you smell that? And someone said, yes. And then my line for the audience, particularly for the adults, is, oh, this trick is better than I thought. Right? Because obviously they know nobody's smelling anything. This is all a trick. It's good to have a few kind of pre-programmed moments of levity, of kind of, jocularity to throw into your presentation. Even if you're not doing a comedy act, humor is universal. So if you have just a couple of things, like, at the very beginning of this, a line I said is, I've never studied these books. In fact, my wife is right over here and she can tell you I have never used these books, which is a joke that I would not do the cooking. Okay. And then it's a slow play reveal. I say, it smells like French fries, but it's not French fries. It smells like maybe some kind of a cooked meat, but it's a meat that's like, it's a meat that tastes like a lot of things. Like, it's not pork, but like chicken. It's chicken. Is it fried chicken? And I don't call the exact thing that's on the page. I let him say, yes, it's Southern Fried Chicken. I only call what is necessary to demonstrate that I actually did hit what I wanted to do. So that is the book test. I think cookbooks make a lot of sense for a book test. The ability to have a large group of pages, and you're going for a recipe name rather than a specific word or set of words. It gives you a lot of freedom for them to choose a page number that you can always scan back to. So that is the common book test. Good luck with that. Happy magicking.